The history of Mindanao. The island of Mindanao was formed from the volcanic activity caused by the collision between the Pacific Plate and the Philippine Sea Plate. During the Pleistocene era, land bridges allowed primitive humans to move into and live in young Mindanao, along with the rest of the country. As the seas cut them off from the world, it was not until the 5th century that traders from other Asian countries established contact with them. When the Islam arrived, they were mostly of Arab descent. Sharif Maktoum was the first prominent figure to arrive in 1310 on the Isle of Sulu. The first constructed mosque in Tubig Indangan of Simunol is attributed to him. Later, Raha Baginda arrives in 1390 along with his army and many followers. He establishes the Sultanate of Sulu, which is later led by Sharif ul Hashim, more commonly known as Abu Bakr, who came in 1450. Sharif Kabungsuan would later arrive in Cotabato and Maguindanao, introducing Islam there and establishing another sultanate. The Islam religion would continue to strengthen and spread. By the time the Spanish arrived in the 16th century, the Muslims were already a prominent force in the region. They enjoyed a strong government and full independence. It is still debated whether the first Christian Mass of the Philippines was held on the soil of Masao or present-day Butuan. Regardless, the Muslims constantly resisted against Spanish rule for 3 centuries. Many of the Spanish losses involved unsuccessful attacks on Jolo, a major island of Sulu. The Muslims would also often raid on Spanish territory in Luzon and Visayas during the times that the Spanish fell back. Throughout the constant fighting, there would often be a noteworthy battle or victory. One such battle was when Captain Juan de Chavez and his army captured Zamboanga and constructed a fort there. In the 17th century, Sultan Kudarat led his people against the Spanish in many decisive battles until a temporary peace treaty was formed in 1645. Later, the Spanish succeeded in capturing most of Lanao and Sulu and conquered Davao in 1848 with the leadership of Jose Cruz de Oyanguren. In 1878, a treaty is formed between the government and Jamal ul Azam, the Sultan of Jolo at the time. The efforts of the Spanish against the Moros, however, would go to waste. They had signed the Treaty of Paris in 1898, thus giving up the whole archipelago to the United States. Like the previous era, the Moors would find themselves fighting against foreigners once again. Shortly after the Americans took over, they signed a treaty with the Sultan of Jolo so that they would be neutral to each other. This would turn out to simply be a means for dealing with the Moors later, as the Americans had to quell with uprisings in Luzon and Visayas first. Later, the treaty was annulled and the two factions resisted against each other. One particular battle was the First Battle of Buddajau, which resulted in few American casualties yet hundreds of dead Muslims. Eventually, peace treaties would be signed by the various sultans of the region, which acknowledged American authority yet allowed the sultanates to maintain their religious position. In 1938, President Quezon declared the National Land Settlement Administration, which declared Mindanao open land for everyone. Hooked by this promise, thousands of Filipinos from Luzon and Visayas, as well as foreign business settlers, migrated to Mindanao, led by General Polino Santos. This upset the Moors greatly, as they thought they owned the lands, and thus they began thinking rebelliously again. This heavy influx of migrants influenced the identity of present-day Mindanao. Eventually, the Muslims decided to do something about it. The Bangsamoro Liberation Front was formed in 1968 by Rashid Lukman for the purpose of establishing Moro independence in the region. 1974 saw the creation of the MNLF, which had more radical ideas. It was created between Nurulaji Misauri, Hashim Salamat, and Dimas Puntato, and its tactics became more brutal as time wore on. In 1976, the Tripoli Agreement between the Philippine government and the MNLF created the Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao, which is to be governed by Muslim Filipinos, and held a ceasefire on both sides. 20 years later, a peace pact ended the war between the two sides, and Nur Misari became the governor of the ARMM. However, this would result in the MNLF breaking up into several factions afterwards, such as the MNLF Reformist Group, the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, and the Abu Sayyaf.
About 100 kilometers away, deep in the jungles of Mindanao, these MILF fighters are making their way back to camp. This is just one of many MILF camps scattered throughout the southern Philippines. Technically, there's a ceasefire between them and the government troops right now, but there have also been many infractions. Once again, tensions are running high. Though not engaged in active combat, they do their drills and stay alert. About 150 fighters live here with their families. All of them, wives and children included, are prepared to die for their cause. Like Violi, she lost her husband to the war, and now her children are involved too. She says she will fight to the very end, until Mindanao is peaceful and prosperous in the name of the Muslim people. The government believes the MILF has trained members of the Abu Sayyaf and Jama Islamiyah in these camps, groups accused of kidnappings, bombings, and other attacks on civilians. The MILF has denied this. But a new breed of fighter is being trained here. Young men in their teens like Pagya Tapa, who were born to the cause and saw their fathers die for it. He isn't quite sure what peace looks like, he says, but he too is willing to die to get it. Away from the camp, government troops are a familiar presence in the MILF heartland, leading locals to think peace is still a far-off reality.
Credits and acknowledgements. Sources: